So I'm Mario Oriedo, and I used to work on cloud development environments and basically on OpenShift test spaces. So since a few months now, I'm working on Podman. I joined the Podman team, and I'm here with Pradipta. Pradipta, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Mario. So I'm Pradipta, part of the OpenShift Sandboxed Containers team working on Kata and confidential containers.
Cool. Thanks, Pradipta. This talk is about cloud development environments in sandboxed containers. And so first of all, I would like to introduce the cloud development environments, and those are actually development environments, including the IDE package in containers and run on Kubernetes or OpenShift or basically in the cloud somehow. So for Red Hat, so we have a product that does that is called OpenShift Dev Spaces that runs development environment, including the VS Code that is the default IDE, or JetBrains IDEs, or other customized IDEs in a container inside a pod in a node of the Kubernetes or OpenShift cluster. So the developer have access to that with the browser. It doesn't have to open a shell or anything. It just clicks on the browser, and so what happens is that it will see, yeah, basically a VS Code like the one that you can see here. So we can navigate the source code. I can open terminal, run the tools that are included in the container, and yeah, for example, yeah, Git or whatever tool you have installed in the container. So it's configurable with as as a container is configured. So you can create an image with a container files, including the tools that you like, and then you can run it as your development environment in the cloud, and then you can share it with your team. So it's something that so the main benefit is that you have reproducible, immutable development environment. And today with AI that is getting traction, so cloud development environments are more and more interesting because those allow developers to have access to resources as a GPU card that they may not have on their laptop, but that may be available in the cluster, in the OpenShift cluster. So and that's pretty cool. But for some reason, so and mainly related to security, you are not able to do whatever you do on your local desktop or in your local laptop on the cloud. So for example, the first question that you get if you set up a development environment in the cloud is, all right, but how do I run Podman, for example? Can I run Podman? Everything is running inside a container in OpenShift. So for the default capabilities that you have in a container in OpenShift, you are not able to start to run Podman. Same thing for like running DNF install something. So you're not able to, so you're not running as a privileged user. So you're not able to run in your container DNF install. And DNF install is something that maybe you do not want the developer to run because you want those development environment to be immutable, reproducible. So you want developers to update their container files instead of running DNF install. But for running Podman, this is something that if we want developers to have the same experience that they have on their laptop, we need a way to do that. And yeah, today it's not working. If you try to, so you can install Podman in the container, but if you try to run it, it currently fails. So with Pradipta, we have been discussing about that and about how Kata containers, sandbox containers could help for that. So I will let Pradipta continue your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. So just a quick word on how the Kata pod or the sandbox container. So sandbox containers is the product name that we use, but this is from a technology standpoint, this is just a Kata pod. So if you look at the picture, the difference is in a regular pod, yes, you run C group isolation, namespace isolation, and run it. But when you run the same pod as a sandbox pod or a Kata pod, so it's basically isolated using a virtual machine. So you see this green box that's basically tells that we have a VM, and inside the VM, the pod is running. So there is an additional layer of isolation that gets added, which kind of protects your worker node from any, let's say, unintended consequence of what is happening on the pod. So that's what the Kata containers or sandbox containers brings to the table. Next slide, Mari. Yeah. So now, how do we run this scenario that Mario mentioned? So what we do is, okay, when the user creates a pod, if it's a privileged pod, what we really want is the privileged pod should always run as a Kata container, right? And not like a regular pod. So what we did is we have a policy engine and have rules in the policy engine, and that's actually a mutating admission controller. So when a pod request comes, if it's a privileged pod, like it wants to run privileged, then it kind of adds runtime class name, because running a pod in Kata is about using a specific runtime class name. So the mutating admission controller adds the runtime class name, and of course adds a specific namespace which is allowed to create privilege pods, and the pod is executed. So which means your development environment now runs inside a Kata container with the privileged capability. So yeah, back to you, Mario.
Sorry, I always have my mic off. Okay, so thank you, Pradipta. So enough speaking. Let's see in action what does it mean. So here, this morning I've set up, provision an OpenShift cluster, and I've installed a couple of operators in it. So the first one is the OpenShift Sandboxed Containers, so Kata containers, that introduce this option to actually run pods is isolated in a VM, and on top of it, so I've installed Eclipse-Che. Eclipse-Che is the upstream version of OpenShift test spaces. So and then I configured Eclipse-Che to actually use isolated development environment so that use the Kata runtime. And I've configured also a policy, so the policy that Pradipta was talking about, that allow a privileged container to run only if the Kata runtime class is actually used. And with that, so I've started a development environment. So this is the landing page of Eclipse-Che. And this is the development environment that I've started. So there are a few files in it. So it's a Java application, but that's not important. The cool thing is that here I'm actually running as root. So if I try to do the podman version and then a podman run, it works. It works just fine. It is something that we would not be able to do if actually that was not running in a privileged container. And the fact that it's privileged allows the developer to have a lot of power, but the fact that it runs in a VM also isolate the pod, the container, so it makes it safe from a security point of view. So this is it from the demo, like additional resources. So link to the Eclipse-Che and to Red Hat OpenShift test spaces, and the OpenShift developer sandbox, that actually is a service where you can try OpenShift test spaces without actually the need to install an OpenShift cluster or installing the operator, and then links to the Sandboxed Containers. So Kata containers, the upstream project, and Red Hat OpenShift Sandboxed Containers, so our product. And then there is also the link to actually, with instruction to set up a cluster to actually run this demo.